So I hope you spent the break time usefully and perhaps did some walking meditation, letting the body and the mind relax when you do that. So let me answer the questions remaining from this morning, and then we'll do the recitations. Okay? So somebody asked, interesting, all the questions have to do with your physical position, which is what I squeezed into the last 7 minutes. So on the bench, do your legs go under the bench, such as in Zen? Yes. And then 2 similar questions. In the Vajra position, can the right foot be on the thigh and the left foot be on top if that's more comfortable? Any reason for a particular leg on top? And another person said, why right hand on left? Can you change that? So, of course, wanting to innovate, we always want to change, and put the other leg up and then down and so on. Okay, so can you put another leg up or down or another hand up or down? It's a free world. You can do that, okay? If the question is it beneficial for your meditation to do that? All I can say is that the great masters, if it were more beneficial to have it that way, they would have said that. They always talk about the most beneficial way of doing things. Having said that, does that mean that it's going to set you back 5 million eons if you change your hands or your legs? I have no idea. That is beyond my pay grade. So I am just conveying to you the instructions of the masters. You can decide what you want to do with it. Why is it that way? I assume, well, I know for the hands, it said because it facilitates the flow of the lung, the prana, or wind energy in the body. And I assume it's the same for the position of the legs, that somehow it facilitates that. Is it a great catastrophe if you do it elsewhere, the opposite way? I have no idea, okay? That's one of those extremely hidden phenomena, okay? And then somebody asked, are there any tips on how to sit so that your feet do not fall asleep, creating that pin and needle feeling? It's really difficult to sit through that without moving. So it may take a while to experiment with different kinds of cushions and different ways of sitting and so on. When you sit, it's recommended to sit on a cushion instead of flat on the floor, although the Tibetans sit flat on the floor. At least when they're inside doing their chanting. When they're outside, they sit on cushions when they're debating, usually, although not always. So is there a way to get it to be unpainful? First of all, I might as well tell you, you will never find the perfect meditation position that is always perfectly comfortable. Never. We are in samsara. That happens when you go to the Pure Land. But when we have these kind of bodies that are under the influence of ignorance, afflictions, and karma, they're going to hurt sometime or another, okay? Now, can we make them hurt less? Yeah. And sometimes when we are really into our meditation, and we're really concentrating and paying attention to what we're meditating on, then the physical sensations don't take front row. They kind of fade into the background. You don't notice them. At the beginning, probably they are front row because we are so used to paying attention to our body. and sense objects, so it becomes quite big in our minds. So it's better when you're sitting on a cushion, you don't put your whole tush on the cush, okay? You sit more on the edge of the cushion, not completely on the edge so that you're slipping off, but not completely flat like that, okay? So if this is your cushion, you don't want your tush to be like this, you want it like this. The idea being that way your spine is a little bit higher and it helps to keep your back straight. You know, when you're flat on the floor, for many people, it's harder to keep the back straight. When your tush is up that little bit and your spine is straight, then you don't have the pressure on your lower thighs, the bottom part of your thighs, and that's where usually the pins and needles originate from, okay? Some people like to put small cushions under their thighs. They put round cushions and square cushions and flat cushions and puffy cushions and hard cushions and soft cushions, and you play around, and sometimes one leg has one cushion and the other leg has two cushions, and one leg likes a soft cushion, another one likes a hard cushion, and you can manipulate them all around and see what is most comfortable for you. Okay? What more can I say? Yeah. So the pins and needles, just try and, for me, I found that when my tush is on the edge of the cushion, it really stops that. Okay. Getting some exercise in the break time really helps, though, to get your energies flowing. Okay. So let's do the visualization for the prayers, the recitations. Then we'll do the recitations. This time in the silence after the recitations, generate your own motivation. I won't lead you in a motivation, so you generate your own. Okay? And then we'll have the talk, and then Q, and probably no A. I don't seem very good at giving people answers these days. Yeah. Different questions are things that, require psychic powers to know, especially when somebody's asking you a personal question as a general question, and how they hear what I say is as if it's personal advice, but I'm speaking generally, okay, because I don't have clairvoyant powers, so I don't know how to answer your question for you. And also, if I answered it for the way you're going to hear it, somebody else that answer may not fit somebody else, okay? Yeah, find a teacher who's a Buddha next time. Okay. So let's imagine we're in the presence of all the holy beings who are looking at us with compassion, acceptance, and a wish, a genuine wish to help us. And then we're surrounded by all the sentient beings, each one of whom has their own individual suffering at this moment, but all of whom suffer under the influence of ignorance, afflictions, and polluted karma. So just as we have some compassion for ourselves when we are confused and ignorant, similarly have compassion for those other living beings. Because all of us want happiness, none of us want suffering. And yet, in our confusion, we seem to run towards creating the causes for suffering. So it's quite a sad situation. Okay, so first to make sure we're using the correct terminology, okay? Concentration is the English translation for the Sanskrit Pali word samadhi, okay? So it just means, it can refer to many things, but in general, what it refers to is a mental factor that all of us have. And, that is the ability to stay focused on an object. So it's something that can be increased through practice or decreased by, physical ailments, or if we, don't practice and lose our concentration. Okay, serenity is how I'm translating the Pali word samatha. Well, it's Pali and Sanskrit shamatha. Okay, and that is referring to a particular degree of concentration. Okay, whereby we can keep our mind focused without laxity or excitement on a virtuous object for quite a while, okay? So they're related, but they're not the same, concentration and serenity, okay? So serenity is a concentration arisen from meditation and accompanied by the bliss of mental and physical pliancy, in which the mind abides effortlessly without fluctuation for as long as we wish on whatever object it has been placed. Okay? And so cultivating serenity in that way, it takes effort on our part. And the effort needs to be consistent effort. If we meditate a lot on Saturday and Sunday and don't do any meditation the rest of the week, it's going to be really difficult to build up our concentration or to build up any kind of virtuous quality for that matter. So it's actually better to do shorter meditations every day than long meditations once a week. Okay? Now, where does serenity fit in the entire path to liberation? Because remember, it's also something that non-Buddhists practice. Okay, Buddhists don't have a special claim on developing this. So in Buddhist practice, at the beginning, what we really need to do is to gain a understand the Buddhist worldview. Okay, and this is done particularly by understanding the four truths. True dukkha being the Pali Sanskrit word that is often translated as suffering, but that's a horrible translation. It means unsatisfactory circumstance. Okay, so there's the dukkha that we experience. That's the first truth. The second is the origin, and that comes back to ignorance and the afflictions and the polluted karma that we create. And because of those things, the mental factors and the polluted karma, we cycle, taking one rebirth after another one after another one. And as we go from one rebirth to another, it's not like we are sitting on a cloud looking down, choosing who our next parents are or where we want to be born. But the power of the afflictions and the karma pushes us to be attracted towards one body or one situation rather than another. Okay? And then, because the ignorance perceives phenomena to exist in the opposite way than how they actually exist. In other words, things exist dependent on causes and conditions, dependent on parts, dependent on being conceived and labeled by consciousness. Although they exist that way, ignorance apprehends them to exist independently, inherently, with their own fixed essence, so we perceive everything as existing objectively out there, unrelated to our mind. And so this is the root cause of our dukkha and of our gross kind of suffering. So it's not other people. It's not the government. It's not, whatever else we usually blame our pain and misery on. Okay? Things come up, our happiness or our suffering is rooted in our mind, depending upon whether we have virtuous or wholesome thoughts on one hand, or non-virtuous, unwholesome thoughts on the other. Okay? Since ignorance perceives, apprehends the opposite of how things can exist, it can be eliminated by generating the wisdom that see how things do exist. Okay, and that is the wisdom realizing the emptiness or lack of inherent existence or objective existence. And so there's a path to follow to generate that kind of wisdom. It's a path that starts with ethical conduct, goes on to develop concentration, and then on that basis to generate wisdom. And then through that wisdom, we can eradicate all the causes of our dukkha, and thus stop the dukkha from the root and attain a state called true cessation or nirvana. Okay, so that's the simple, abbreviated version, yeah. But where does concentration fit in that? It fits in with the fourth truth, the path, the true path that will lead us to nirvana. Okay? So the actual true path is that wisdom mind that sees things as they are, which is the opposite way of how ignorance apprehends them. But it isn't just a wisdom mind that for a split second sees reality and then goes back to our old habitual way of projecting independent objective existence. It has to be a wisdom that can last for a long time in our mind, and a wisdom that is capable of really penetrating, of penetrative analysis that can determine how things exist. and what exists ultimately and what doesn't exist ultimately. So with a scattered mind that can't concentrate, trying to develop that penetrative analytical wisdom that investigate how things exist is very difficult to do, because you start out doing that and then you're thinking about lunch and you're thinking about your boyfriend or girlfriend, and then you're thinking about the election, and then you're thinking about some, and your analytical wisdom has gone bye-bye. Yeah. So we need really that concentration so that we can develop the wisdom, and then also, having developed the wisdom, after we've developed it, to be able to hold the mind single-pointedly on emptiness, so that the mind becomes very, very familiar with that. Because holding reality, ultimate reality in our mind like that is a very, very strong purification, and can cut the afflictions. It can cut a lot of the karma. Okay? So that's where concentration comes in. Now, of course, we don't start out as beginners meditating on this analytical wisdom that knows how things ultimately exist, because it's very difficult to do that, because we can't even recognize the false way that we're apprehending things. Okay, so there's a whole lot of other practice we have to do before that. Okay, and all these other practices, on the first level, we do practice, we really try and get our ethical conduct in good shape, so that we can have a good future rebirth, because that is the most necessary thing, the most urgent thing that we work towards in our spiritual practice. Because although they say you can attain awakening in one lifetime, it's extremely difficult to do. And you have to have eons, or at least many lifetimes before you, of practice. Okay, so it's not as baby beginners, we sit down and then wham, bang, it all comes together. A lot depends on what we've done in our previous lives. Okay, so when they say enlightenment in this lifetime, it means for somebody who's done a lot in their previous life. Okay, so, because it's going to take us many lifetimes to attain full awakening, the urgent thing is to make sure that we purify the negativities that will throw us into an unfortunate rebirth, and create lots and lots of virtuous karma, so that next lifetime we can have a good rebirth, a fortunate one, where we can meet the Dharma, meet excellent teachers, have the material wherewithal that we need in order to practice, and so on. Okay? So that's the chief focus, that we really aim at. And we do that by recognizing the value of our precious human life, understanding that we're not going to live forever, and we only have limited time, and that if we're going to practice purely, we have to reduce our attachment to the happiness of only this life. Okay, why? First of all, nobody's saying the happiness of this life is bad or wrong. Okay, that's not being said. Happiness of this life is happiness of this life. It beats suffering of this life. However, what becomes a problem is when we get attached to the happiness of this life. And because of it, we get distracted from our Dharma practice. And we create a lot of negative karma, many negative actions, motivated by clinging to that happiness of this life. So we may lie to get what we want, steal to get what we want, beat somebody up if they're interfering with our happiness, cause dissension between other people if we think that will get us somewhere, more power or something like that. Okay? So under the influence of this attachment to the happiness of this life, we create a lot of negativities that create the cause for an unfortunate rebirth in the next life, where it will be extremely difficult for us to practice the Dharma. Okay? So that's why at the very beginning it's so important to get our act together on the ethical level. So this doesn't mean Sunday school morality, where you're threatened with punishment if you're a bad girl or a bad boy. Okay, it's explaining what actions create the cause of happiness, what actions create the cause of suffering. The Buddha explained that because his wisdom could see these connections from one life to the next. So he explained it. But we're the ones who have to practice, and we have full choice in whether we practice ethical conduct or not. Nobody's making us, nobody's punishing us, but it definitely is advantageous to do that. Also, because if we want to develop wisdom, we have to have concentration so that we can penetrate the ultimate nature and stay on it. But to do that, we have to do it on the basis of good ethical conduct. Because if we don't keep good ethical conduct, when we sit down to meditate, what's going through our mind? All of our plans for all the things we're going to do to get what we want and harm the people that interfere with our happiness. Okay? So if we don't have good ethical conduct that can restrain from those actions and from thinking about doing those actions, then it's going to be hard to concentrate on the nature of reality or bodhicitta or anything, because our minds are going to be all wrapped up in, I want to get even, and who am I going to manipulate in order to get something out of them, and somebody else is ruining my reputation, so how can I get them to stop by retaliating, and on and on and on, okay? So ethical conduct is really important just to generate concentration. Yeah. Also, without ethical conduct, okay, so first of all, a lack of ethical conduct makes us very distracted in our meditation. But second of all, the lack of ethical conduct, when we sit down to meditate, then there's a lot of regret. Or not even regret, there can be guilt. There can be self-derogatory self-talk. Look what I did. I'm such a bad person. I feel so ashamed. Something's really wrong with me that I did that, And guilt and this kind of derogatory self-talk, these are not virtuous mental factors. Yeah, they are mental factors to be abandoned on the path because they really interfere with us developing wisdom and compassion. Okay, but when we don't keep a good ethical conduct, then these kind of, feeling guilty, remorseful, scared that somebody else is going to find out what we really did, all of that interferes with having a calm mind. And concentration, serenity, is, a super calm mind. Okay? So we have to build things up in our practice gradually. We don't just start out with, I'm going to develop single-pointedness right away. So we have to gain the Buddhist worldview. We have to get our ethical act in order. Yeah. And these things are not so easy. Yeah, because most of us, if a thought comes in our mind, we follow that thought without really thinking about the results of our thought. What actions are we going to do, and how is that going to influence other people? I was reading, because I tend to like to use modern examples, that so in Portland, there was one of the right-wing white supremacists who was killed. So the man who killed him, reportedly after he killed him, he went home and he became very worried about getting arrested and imprisoned, and he feared that he would be killed while he was imprisoned. Prison is not a peaceful place. He was afraid of being killed by right-wing groups in prison. He was also, so his mind had so much worry, so much fear. He also had 2 kids. He was very worried about what would happen to his son and daughter if something happened to him. Okay, now, before he, pulled the trigger when he was in Portland last week, he didn't think about the repercussions of his actions, that he could get arrested, get imprisoned, that his kids would not have a father, okay, that his mind would be overwhelmed with fear and worry. He didn't think about that. All he thought about was, oh, it looks like this guy is dangerous and I better shoot him before he does something to me. Okay? So it's a stark example of what we all do, in the sense that we don't, we have an urge and we follow it. We don't think about what the results are going to be. Yeah? And let alone, he didn't consider the results for this life, which I just kind of unpacked, but also, what about the results for future lives? Yeah, he took a life, that's not going to create the cause for happiness. That kind of karma is going to create the cause of suffering. Okay, so this is why ethical conduct is so important, before, to really get that in shape and to learn to think about the results of our actions without being so self-centered before we act. And that helps us to develop a kind of conventional wisdom that understands the law of karma and its effects, which is very, very helpful if we understand that, because then we can create the causes for happiness and abandon the causes of suffering. Okay, that man, when the police came to arrest him, there were several police SUVs, going down his street. He came out with a gun, and they don't know whether he fired or first, or if he fired or didn't, but anyway, the police fired and he was killed. Yeah, so not a good ending. Not a good ending for him or for the person he killed. Okay. So whether we agree with somebody's political philosophy or not should not influence whether we preserve a life or not. All lives deserve to be preserved. Yeah. And it doesn't matter whose it is. Yeah. But when we say Black Lives Matter, it isn't meaning no other lives matter. Okay. It's like saying, I like apples. It doesn't mean that you can't stand oranges. Yeah, because you like fruit in general. You're just not focusing on the oranges right now. Okay? But the point I'm getting at is we need to grow up so that vindictive politics don't take over our mind and fill our mind with thoughts of hatred and revenge and so on. Okay. So that you have some idea now where concentration fits in the path. I also should say that as Buddhists, our ultimate aim, especially as Mahayana Buddhists, is to become fully awakened for the benefit of all sentient beings. As you develop concentration, you can get all sorts of psychic powers, but that is not the end product, what we are aiming for, especially if you're somebody who's seeking psychic powers to increase your income, to increase your status with your friends, to feel that you're somebody important. Okay? Because there's different kinds of psychic powers. Some people have some, beginning kinds of psychic powers because of karma, not because of concentration, not because of wisdom, but simply because of their karma. And these psychic powers sometimes may be reliable and sometimes are not reliable. Other psychic powers are developed with concentration, okay? But if you have the motivation that you want to be somebody important by having psychic powers, or you want to, manipulate other people through using them or whatever, then those psychic powers are going to lead you to create non-virtue, which is going to be harmful to you. Okay, so the psychic powers are useful if you have a motivation of bodhicitta and you want to benefit sentient beings, because then you can understand sentient beings' mentality and disposition at a very deep level and know exactly how to explain the Dharma to them, which kind of teaching they need at a specific moment, and so on. So in that case, psychic powers are useful, but they're the byproduct. Yeah, we're aiming for liberation. Okay, so wisdom and compassion are the important things. Let's see, I wanted to say something else about that. Yeah, so, I know. One time, when I was living in Hong Kong, I was invited to speak at an English language medium school. and to little kids. It was grammar school and I think middle school. So I gave my talk, and this was in the age of Uri Geller. Do you remember him? He was an Israeli who had some kind of psychic powers. He could bend a spoon, that was across the room and, do these kinds of things. So anyway, one cute little boy raised his hand and he said, "Can you bend spoons that are far away?" And so this was going to be his criteria, whether to judge whether I was a real practitioner or not, whether I could bend spoons that were far away. And I said, "No, I can't bend spoons that are far away. And anyway, I don't think that would make anybody happy if I did, especially the people who own the spoons, because if I bent them, then they couldn't use them." I was like, oh, yeah. So this is the kind of thing, that we just need to be aware of so that we stay very focused on what our ultimate aim is, okay? Yeah, and when somebody asks you these things, first of all, as monastics, we should never lie about having powers that we don't have. Yeah, if you do, then your monastic ordination is finished, out, no chance. Yeah, that's it. Even if you have those powers, in the Vinaya, we are not supposed to show them to other people or talk about them to other people. Why? Because it generates this false feeling among people that is something supercalifragilisticexpialidocious that everybody should try and attain. Whereas what the world needs is not more people who can bend spoons, but more people who have a kind heart, more people who tell the truth, more people who can make wise decisions. Okay? So even if people have those powers, if they show them off, it gives the public the wrong kind of feeling. Now, it could be that a teacher who has a close relationship with a particular disciple may reveal that kind of thing, but never in an arrogant way, and certainly not to the public. Yeah, because can you imagine that? I mean, can you imagine if the Dalai Lama showed psychic powers, okay? Everybody would, rush to Dharamsala to interview him. CNN would be there, and even Fox News would go. And they would all want to have interviews with the Dalai Lama, so maybe he could, tell the future of who's going to win the election, or manifest some more money to give to their candidate, or, who knows what, okay? So that's why these things are not shown publicly or discussed publicly. Yeah. Could you just imagine that? They're all trekking up to Dharamsala. Half of these guys could never make it. Not the bumpy ride, But, yeah. Be quite interesting. Okay, so then before we start practicing serenity, it's good to know what the benefits of practicing it are, because when we know the benefits of something, then we're eager to do it. Okay, so if we have a serenity, then all of our virtuous actions become more focused and have a stronger effect on our mind. we can meditate in a deeper way because we can stay on the object of meditation. And serenity also sets the stage for attaining the deeper states of concentration in the dhyanas, or the Pali word is jhanas. Okay? Serenity makes the body and mind peaceful. It's the basis for generating wisdom and insight. Okay, and so, when we have a good motivation, concentration is good for our whole practice, and enables us to really, when we meditate even on the Lamrim meditations, to get a very strong feeling about them instead of just kind of some intellectual conclusion, but to have a strong feeling about them. Having said that, it's very interesting that in the Tibetan tradition, our teachers don't encourage us to aim for serenity right away. Developing some concentration, yes, that is very useful to us as beginners. But our teachers don't emphasize generating serenity right away, or generating the dhyana concentrations right away. Why? Because those are so peaceful and so blissful that somebody who doesn't have renunciation of samsara can get very caught up in those meditative states and not want to do further practice. Okay? Because if you're blissed out in samadhi, then you have to come out of your samadhi to study the teachings on wisdom, and then to analyze how things exist, and to really think deeply about how things exist. And if you're very attached to pleasure, you just say, well, hey, I want to stay in my samadhi, and wisdom can wait, okay? Because they don't have the wish to get out of samsara. There's no renunciation of samsara or the aspiration for liberation, okay? So we don't want to get stuck in that kind of state, because that's when you die, you've spent your whole life focusing in these blissful states, but not on the liberating wisdom. And focusing there on those states will cause you to be reborn in the realms, in the classes of beings who are born there by power of their meditative stability. Okay? So in samsara, there's different levels of beings. We're in the desire realm. Makes sense, because we're always desiring stuff. There's many different kinds of beings in the desire realm: hell beings, hungry ghosts, animals, human beings, and worldly kind of gods, the gods or the celestial beings, that live in the forest and so on. Those are desire realm beings. Above that, there's the form realm that has 4 major levels that can be subdivided into 17 or 18, depending how you're counting. And above that are the 4 formless absorptions. The way you get born in either the form realm or the formless realms is as a human being generating the kind of concentration, the depth of concentration that those beings in those realms have. Okay, so if you're a human being and you get attached to the bliss of, let's say, the 3rd dhyana, that's what you've attained, That's what you're meditating in. When you die, you will be born in the third dhyana. Now, on one hand, that is called a virtuous rebirth, because not a virtuous, a fortunate rebirth, in that you aren't experiencing, very coarse, horrible pain. On the other hand, that is not a particularly desirable rebirth if you're a Dharma practitioner, because you can again get distracted by the bliss. And because if you're born as a human being, we have enough happiness here to practice, but enough suffering to remember that we're in samsara. So a human rebirth is very advantageous for practicing. Yeah, because we have this combination of suffering and happiness. Whereas in the form realm and formless realms, there's not so much suffering, gross suffering. So there's less impetus to generate renunciation of samsara and want to attain nirvana or full awakening. And without that aspiration, then you're not going to develop the wisdom and the other qualities that you need to be liberated or fully awakened. Okay? So this is what they say happens to many of the non-Buddhists. They develop the states of the form and formless realm concentrations, but they mistake it for nirvana because it's so blissful. So they think, oh, I've attained nirvana. They haven't. They still have the true origin of dukkha in their mind stream. They still have ignorance, afflictions, polluted karma. Those haven't been eradicated. So when they die from this life as a human being, they go, I thought I had attained nirvana, but now I see that I'm going to get reborn. So then they completely fall into despair and they lose faith in their whole spiritual practice because they see that they mistook high states of concentration for liberation. Okay. Okay, so Shantideva has a very nice quote about this. He says, recognizing that the afflictions are eradicated by insight or wisdom, imbued with serenity. First, seek serenity that is attained by those who joyfully renounce worldly pleasure. So first, we joyfully renounce worldly pleasure. On the basis of that, serenity is easy to attain. On the basis of that, it's much easier to generate insight, and then that leads to the liberating realizations. Okay? But we can still improve our concentration now, even though it's not going to get to serenity now. Now, why isn't it going to get to serenity now? People are going to look, but, they say you can generate it in this life. Why are you saying that? Well, we have to be practical. And there are certain external and internal conditions that are needed to attain serenity. So some of us, or you, may be able to do this, yeah. But I'm going to go through the conditions for generating serenity now so that you know that it's not just a matter of sitting down and meditating for an hour or two every day. It's, to generate just serenity, and this isn't even wisdom, we need a whole lot of other circumstances, okay? So Asanga in his text Shravakabhumi, and Kamalashila in his text, The Middle Stages of Meditation, they listed some of these. Okay, so first one is a favorable place. Okay, so we need a place to meditate that is calm, quiet, healthy, secluded from commotion and hubbub. Okay, so we've just excluded living in a city, right? Maybe even living in a suburb. It has to have clean water and clean air, and located in a place where we can obtain food, clothing, shelter, and medicine. Okay, so it can't be like so far out. Westerners, we're so glamorous, We want to find a cave in the Himalayas and go and meditate. But how are you going to get food there? Okay, who's going to hike up the Himalayas to bring you food? And, it gets kind of cold in the Himalayas, and there's no electricity in caves, most of them. So you can't bring your heater for the winter and your air con for the summer. Okay. The reason why we seek a favorable, more secluded place like this is because then we aren't going to be so interrupted by other people and animals and machines and people doing the census and, people collecting signatures on a petition and people trying to convert us to another religion. Okay, so we'll be more isolated, but still able to get our worldly requirements. Okay, and have it, be calm. You don't want to be in a place where the elephants are trumpeting and the lions are roaring and the mice are squeaking. Okay. Okay, then prior to entering strict retreat, we should, because serenity is usually developed in a strict retreat situation. Yeah. So for that retreat, we need the favorable place. Second thing is we need a clear and correct understanding of the teachings on how to develop serenity. Okay? Because when you're developing serenity, there's different hindrances that arise, there's different faults that our concentration can be subjected to. We need to learn what those are, how to oppose them, what the different stages are that lead up to the attainment of serenity, what are the qualities of serenity so that we can see if our meditation is going in that direction or not. Okay? Because again, if we just go by our own ideas and not what the texts say, you can be meditating and then all of a sudden it looks like Chenrezig has appeared before you. Maybe what's happened is you've had an exceptionally clear visualization, but you say, I had a vision of Chenrezig, and then it's like, wow, I've got it, this is something really far out. Yeah, or, you're meditating and then you have this feeling of your body dissolving. Okay, oh, now I've gone beyond the gross body. Or you have a feeling of being one with everything, which, by the way, Buddhists never feel one with everything. Why? Because one implies two. It implies duality. Buddhists go for non-duality. Okay, so non-duality is different than being one with everything. They're very different. But you may have an experience of feeling one with everything and think, wow, this is it. Okay, that's what serenity is. No, it's not. It's just an unusual meditative experience. Some of our unusual meditative experiences are valuable. They really show us what our mind is capable of. Like if you're meditating and your mind gets really incredibly calm, that can be very encouraging because, oh, wow, look, it is possible for me to have this kind of calm mind. Yeah. But meditating and then seeing flashing colors and faces appearing to you and Chenrezig coming and all this stuff, not really so much. Okay. I remember when I was exploring spiritual practice in LA before I encountered Buddhism. So I was looking at, different things to go to. So I went to one thing, and there people were meditating, and it was seen as very positive if you just naturally fell back in your meditation. You lean back and fell back. That was considered a positive result of your meditation. So, not knowing anything better, when I sat down the next day, of course, I wanted to have that experience. So, sure enough, I started feeling like I was leaning back, not all the way back, but part back. And I thought, oh, maybe I'm getting somewhere. Yeah. It's terribly laughable now when you think about it. And I remember even after I met Buddhism, and you hear teachings. I had heard teachings about the subtle mind. Yeah, coarse mind, subtle mind. So I was meditating one day, and I had this feeling of like I could just detect all the much more silent kind of chatter in my mind. Not the gross chatter, but much more silent ideas or words or images. And I thought, oh, maybe this is the subtle mind. Then I learned more about what subtle mind is. I realized, I was very far away from it. Okay, so sometimes we hear words and then we have some experience and then we think, now I've got it. This is it. So there's some book that has a title, something like The Laundry After the Ecstasy or the Ecstasy. After the ecstasy, the laundry. Okay? So you have ecstatic meditation experiences. And then when you come down, you're very disappointed because you're your same old obnoxious self, and you have to do something that is for worldly beings like the laundry. And you thought that you were, really rising up into the transcendental state. Yeah. Okay. So this happens to most people at some time or another, So that's why, again, we have to have a clear idea what our focus is. Okay. Our focus is not falling back in our meditation. Our focus is not feeling like we're one with everything. You can have some experiences that show you the breadth of your mind and unusual experiences, and that's fine. But don't get attached to them and don't assume that what you think those experiences are what those experiences are. Because it's very important when we're meditating, and especially with Serenity meditation, to check our experience with meditators who have attained this, okay? Because all sorts of stuff comes up, and it's not always blissful. You know, sometimes you have memories of things that happened decades ago that you haven't reached a state of peace with in terms of your mind. And these memories come up and you get raging furious. Yeah. Or you get super attached to something, or who knows what. So that is why we also need, if we're going into retreat to develop serenity, we need to be aware of what the major afflictions are and what the antidotes to them are. And we need to be able to discern a virtuous from a non-virtuous mind. Okay? And that requires a great deal of self-honesty. Yeah, because it's really so much more romantic to think that, because for me, I can close my eyes, I can see faces very easily. I can see faces. I look at carpeting or floors, with speckles on them. I can look and I can see faces. This is my creative mind. It is not anything special, okay? But, if you think it's something special, then you could get really into, you're sitting there and all these different faces that are appearing, and like, are these faces of my past life? Am I seeing something of the future? Is this looks like somebody who beat me up in 5th grade? Am I having, what do they call it in psychology? Kind of memories that you haven't, huh? Flashbacks. I'm having flashbacks, or I'm having, realizing things that had already been suppressed. And we get into that. And if we don't know how to handle our own mind when that happens, okay, then it's very difficult. So we have to learn how to assess, what is just having a very creative mind, and what is a real flashback or memory. And we may have to consult with, therapists or meditation teachers or what, who can help us just, figure that out. And then, even if it is an accurate memory, how do you deal with it? Yeah. How do you deal with it in a Dharma way? Do we have the ability to deal with it in a Dharma way? Or do we need to, see a therapist and get that kind of help? Or is it just an overly creative mind that can see all sorts of things? Because, when we watch movies, all the images that we see in movies are imprinted in our mind. And, they come up at night when we dream. Yeah. Are the things we dream about real? No. So just because in our meditation we saw a face or something, is that a real face? Does it have some, important meaning? Or is it just, things bubbling up from the past? Okay, so we have to be able to discriminate these things and to learn how to work with our mind. Yeah, one of my friends who did quite a long retreat, she said that she had commercial jingles coming up in her mind when she was developing trying to develop concentration. Because our mind, and sometimes it's just like this litter box of all kinds of stuff we've contacted in our life. Yeah? And so it's like this garbage comes up and that garbage comes up, and, we have to know what to do with it. Otherwise, every time something unpleasant comes up, we freeze. Yeah? So we need that kind of background before doing this kind of strict retreat. Okay, so we need that clear and correct understanding of the instructions. Third, we need to be free of coarse desires and have few desires. Okay, so even if we live in a secluded place, that doesn't stop us from craving a soft bed, okay, a cell phone, delicious food, sex, a sci-fi novel. We can crave anything and everything. So we, in order to really engage in this retreat, we have to have a certain degree of disinterest in that kind of stuff. Okay, fourth, we need a mind that is satisfied and content. So a mind that doesn't always desire more and better. So this can be more and better, I want more food, I want better, this and that. It can also be in our meditation, I want kind of better meditation. I've been doing this retreat for 2 months now, and my mind's still berserky, So kind of the dissatisfied mind that wants more, that wants better, okay? That, wants more food, because it's very interesting when you deprive yourself of other sense things, everything becomes focused on food, okay? So you found your cave, and it's like, do they deliver pizza here? I'm really in the mood for pizza now. Okay, then fifth is our involvement in worldly activities must be minimal. Okay, so if you have a job, you're busy, you're engaged in worldly activities. If you have a family and you're bringing up children, you have to pay attention to your kids, and that requires your energy. And you have to, know what all the latest things are in kid jargon. Yeah. So don't expect to develop serenity. You can improve your concentration, but don't expect that you're going to have serenity and single pointedness. If you have a very busy life and you're running around doing all sorts of things, and this can happen in a monastery as well, as we all know. Okay. And then the sixth requirement is to have pure ethical conduct. Okay. And that's for the reason that I explained before, that it helps us to have a calm mind to start with, and a calmer mind that comes from observing precepts is going to be able to meditate more. Okay, so that's that section. Are there questions now before I go on to talking about meditation objects?
Does serenity have to be developed anew every lifetime, or is that something that one can carry from one life to another?
Serenity. My guess is that it has to be developed anew every lifetime. Well, in the desire realm. If you're born into the form or formless realms, that's because of the level of concentration you've attained. And so that just continues. If you're born in the desire realm, I would think that you would have to develop it again each lifetime, but if in your previous lifetime you had developed it, it would come much more quickly in this lifetime. Yeah. And maybe for high bodhisattvas who have great control over their mind, they may be able to die and then reappear with serenity. Yeah. But for the rest of us,
Someone from online asks, I learned that Tsongkhapa compiled the Lamrim Chenmo to help address the spiritual chaos in Tibet at that time. What made it chaos? There are so many spiritual views and practices in this country. Is the US in spiritual chaos? Is there a benefit to all the diverse spiritual approaches and practices?
there is benefit in the sense that sentient beings have different dispositions, different interests, different things that make sense to them. So it's not one thing fits all. You know, people are quite different. Spiritual chaos, what does that mean? I mean, individuals have spiritual chaos in the sense that we're totally unfocused and we don't know what we believe in and what we don't believe in. Is a society spiritually chaotic? I mean, does chaotic mean you have a diversity of paths, or what? I need some help here understanding the question. Or if anybody understands it, please explain to me more.
Well, I know that you've researched the Chinese traditions, and do they emphasize delaying developed serenity in the same way that Tibetans do in order to develop other things first?
It looks to me that way, that for most people, you know, they engage in practices to develop compassion and bodhicitta first. And, you know, you still have a meditative practice. You still meditate. You still develop your meditative ability. But the Chinese monastics I know are not going up into the mountains. And Venerable Wuyan, we were talking the other day, some of her disciples went off to Thailand, was it? And got really into meditative practice and serenity. And that's very, very good. Nobody's going to knock that. But they didn't want to come back and do things, socially engaged work to benefit society. Yeah.
You mentioned a few different reasons for why ethical conduct needs to come as the basis for concentration. And the first thing you mentioned was getting distracted by, maybe harm we might do to others. Is that in some way more distracting than just thinking about the lunch you might make for next week? It seems like there's lots of types of distractions, and I'm wondering if the negative ones are extra distracting.
Okay. Getting attached, just wondering what lunch is one thing. But, I really want this kind of lunch, and how am I going to arrange to get it? You can get really into that, and it's like, boy, the person in charge of the kitchen isn't, doing this and that, and then I've got to go talk to them because I want pizza, okay? When you study about karma and its effects, which we've been doing on Friday night, then, we hear that just in general, the physical, when they list out the 10 destructive actions, they start with the most serious and go to the least serious, except with wrong views, because that perpetuates all the rest of them. But there are also so many factors that influence whether an action is heavy or light that you can't really make decisive determination there. Okay? So somebody may have one negative thought, oh, I'm remembering how my brother, did this to me when we were 5 years old, and I'm still mad at him. And then, you forget about that. And then later you have another distraction about, you are really craving pizza, and you've got to make sure that you tell the people who are responsible for bringing you your food that you need pizza, and you're not going to get let up on them until they do. So you're putting much more energy into that clinging attachment, and maybe even you'll speak harsh words to them if they don't bring you the pizza.
Does Venerable have any advice for restlessness during sitting meditation that prevents concentration in a calmly abiding mind?
Okay, we're going to get to restlessness. It's one of the hindrances. There's physical restlessness and there's mental restlessness. When we get to the hindrances, it's mostly mental restlessness. For physical restlessness, that's where I advise exercise, walking meditation, Tai Chi, yoga, Qigong, and also being patient, because it's going to take a while for the energies in your body to get used to calming down because your body's sitting still. Yeah. But there's things you can do to release some of that physical restlessness too. But to talk a little bit about the objects of meditation, because there's a lot of misunderstanding about this. We don't develop serenity with our physical senses. So it's not by staring at a candle or staring at a flower. Serenity is not developed by the visual consciousness, okay? It's developed by the mental consciousness. So there's a number of different objects that you can look at, and then you close your eyes and you imagine them, and that is how you develop serenity. Mm-hmm. Now, one object that's very recommended in terms of that is the image of the Buddha, because if we can train our mind to focus single-pointedly on the Buddha, it has many other benefits, because then when we do our recitations and we visualize the Buddha, the visualization comes much clearer because we've been using that as our object of concentration. And also, we develop more of a feeling for the Buddha, and it deepens our refuge. It's like when you spend time being with a good friend, the relationship develops. When we spend time visualizing the Buddha, we're establishing a relationship with the Buddha, because we're not thinking of the Buddha as a flat painting or as a concrete statue, a material statue. We may look at those things to get an idea about what a Buddha looks like, but then we close our eye, or lower our eyes, I should say, and visualize. Okay, so that visual object becomes the observed object for our development of serenity. Okay, and it really brings much more of a feeling of connection with the Buddha, much more joy in the mind, because the Buddha is sitting there so peacefully. It's like when you've had a really bad day and you walk in front of, if you have an altar at home and you walk in front of it and you see a statue of the Buddha sitting there so peacefully, all of a sudden it hits you, oh, I can be like that too. So it's the same kind of thing. We visualize the Buddha, and he's just, his eyes are serene. The whole body language is very serene, and that helps to calm our mind. Okay? So it has a very calming influence. When we use the Buddha as an object of an observed object for our meditation on the Serenity, you can look at a tanka or a statue. Lower your eyes, do the visualization. Now, some people are going to say, I can't visualize. If I say pizza, do you have an image of pizza in your mind? What's on it? I bet you know. Yeah? If I say, think of your mom, it doesn't matter if your mom is alive or not. Do you have an image of your mom in your mind? Okay, this is all visualization. So visualization is not some kind of mystical thing, and we're not trying to see things with the same clarity as we do with our eyes when we're starting out with visualization. It's just a mental image in the mind, yeah? So when we're visualizing the Buddha, at first we're visualizing the Buddha in front of us. Maybe it ranges from maybe 3 to 6 feet in front of us. Some people say a body length in front of us. You don't want the Buddha so close that, it feels uncomfortable. They're so far away that you can't see him very well. In terms of the size, they say that as your concentration gets better, the size can be smaller. But at the beginning, some people say to even make it like this size, okay, a cubit, or smaller. You have to see kind of what feels natural and comfortable to your mind about the size of the Buddha. You don't want to make him so small that you strain your mind. When you're developing serenity, you don't want to make your mind tight. Yeah, avoid that. So you don't want it so small that your mind is tight. And also because you're trying to get every single detail. What shape are the Buddha's fingernails? You don't want to make your mind tight like that. Yeah. You also don't want to make your mind so loose that it's like the Buddha is morphing, and sometimes he's standing, and sometimes he's sitting, and sometimes he's waving to you. No, you have you have one image of the Buddha and you stick with that, okay? You don't change it every meditation session. The Buddha doesn't one day have the left leg on the right thigh and then the next day have the right leg on the left thigh and the other way around, okay? And, you keep kind of the same thing so that you can really develop some concentration on it. At first, what you visualize may just be like some golden colored blob that is in the shape of a human being. Yeah, that's good enough. When you're starting, that's good enough. It's good when you first start your session. You go over all the details and you remember what the Buddha's eyes look like and where his hand position and everything is. And you go over all the details. And then you focus on the whole composite, as best as you can. If it starts to fade, then you go over the details again and to make it more vivid. But you also, don't immediately have to do that. You have to be satisfied at some point, because if you're getting just some kind of general blob, if you try and, go over the details, and then you have the whole Buddha for about 5 seconds, and then you lose the eyes, and then you go back to the eyes and do the eyes again, and then the thing, and now you've lost the nose, and you're going to drive yourself crazy, okay? So even if what you get is just some kind of general shape in the right color, or, you get one part and the other part isn't so clear, that's good. Keep your mindfulness on that. Okay? So you have, remember, mindfulness is what keeps our mind on the object. So whatever image you get, just keep your mind on that. If it really gets so spacey and totally lost, then go back and go over all the details. But do go over the details at the beginning when you're sitting. Okay? So that should get you going for tonight and tomorrow morning. And then we'll continue tomorrow.